You are going to learn to draw a head today, or at least understand the planes of the head. Our guest today is Stephen Bauman, and he's coming to us live from Norway. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Eric. Nice to see you, and nice to see everybody that's out there.
Well,
actually, I don't get to see everybody, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, you clearly have a Norwegian accent. What's the deal?
I've been working really hard on my Norwegian accent. You know, I do impressions of like the sportscasters. You know, it's really, it's deep. Yeah, it's good.
And where are you from originally?
Originally, not that my accent would tell you anything about it, but I'm from Miami, Florida. I was born there in 1980.
Yeah, well, we have that in common. I lived there in 1980. So cool. Yeah. So, Stephen, you're in Norway because?
I'm in Norway because Norway is fantastic and beautiful, and my wife Cornelia, who I think everybody must have seen a couple days ago, right?
Yep.
Her family is from Norway, specifically from a county called Vestfold, where the major city there is Tønsberg, and we wanted to be closer to them, and also, by the way, just to be in a beautiful kind of place with great nature and so on. Sounds
wonderful. Yeah. Well, so tell me a little bit about what you're going to share with us today.
So primarily, I'm going to be talking about the centerline concept and how I use that to construct a head. It basically is a template that we can use when you're in a situation like we all are starting at an artwork, where you start from zero, right? You have the blank paper staring at you. You have a model or a source photograph that is full of information. And you need to figure out, well, do I just start drawing the eyelashes and move outward from there? Or do I kind of construct the head? And I'm going to be taking the latter approach.
Okay, good. I'm very curious to see that. I got a little sneak preview of what you're going to do. So this is pretty exciting. You guys want to hang in there. Stephen is teaching online, teaching students all around the world. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. So first, sure, I'm going to make a couple of announcements, and we'll be back to you in a minute.
Cool.
All right, today, I should have bags under my eyes. You see, there's not many bags under there. I should have big bags under my eyes because this today begins the second 6 months of being here live for you guys every day. Yesterday, we celebrated 6 months. Today is day number 186, and it's just hard to believe. As I may have told you, I know I told some of you, and that is that I started this out at the beginning of coronavirus, and the idea was give you something to kind of keep you focused while you were stuck at home, give you something not to worry about. And so I started doing these broadcasts every day at noon, and also every day at 3 p.m. giving you a sample of some of the many art instruction videos that we've created. As you guys know, we always select only the very best artists in the world. And you know, if there was Streamline or Lilidol or CCP, they're the finest. And so we create these videos for you. Many of our videos are full length. You know, some are 10 or 20 hours. They're like a full course. And but we're giving you like 1 hour samples every day at 3 p.m. So you're going to learn more about that in a minute. But we have a big prize. I wish I had sound effects. I need a sound effects person. Anyway. Yesterday, I announced that I'm giving away a full scholarship, a full attendance scholarship to Realism Live, our virtual art conference, which has got the world of artists attending. And the winner is, I need a drum roll. And the winner is Gerta Luxwood in The Hague, Netherlands. All right. Congratulations to Gerta. Gerta, I'll be following up with you and making sure that you get your ticket so that you can attend Realism Live. Now, the event is pretty cool. In case you're not aware of it, Realism Live is 5 full days of online learning, basically about 8 hours a day. And it's really intense. One of the people that attended the one I did for plein air said it was like a fire hose into a teacup of information. We have absolutely the world's best artists involved, and you want to be able to attend it. Now, I just want to tell you guys some of the names. First off, we've got Connor Walton from Ireland. Some of the instructors are from other countries. We have Josh LaRock, William Schneider, Kathy Odom, Victoria Herrera, Tony Serenai, Todd Casey, Stephen Bauman, who is our guest today. We're going to learn more about him. Rose Franson, Mark D'Alessio, one of the world's great landscape painters, Kathy Anderson, Juliet Aristides. You're going to learn drawing from Juliet. Jesus Emmanuel Villarreal, Jeff Legg doing still life, Graydon Parrish, you got to see that. Gabriella Deloso, this is a new edition, just added. Aaron Meads is going to be teaching beginning drawing. Eric Koppel, I'm sorry, I always get it wrong. Dean Mitchell, legendary Dean Mitchell. Daniel Sprick, another legend. Daniel Graves, yet another legend. The legends just keep coming. Here's another one. Dan Gerhardt, Cornelia Hernes, Jennifer Balkan. And in case you missed this is a relatively new announcement. This is like gives me shivers. Odd Nerdrum. How did we pull that off? This is a world-class opportunity to meet the best artists in the world, to watch them talk or draw or give their philosophies or teach you various segments on art. And so you just do not want to miss this. This is incredible. What you do is you go to realismlive.com, and I've just got a little quick promo for you. Five days of online art lessons from leading artists. Learn to paint nature, people, flowers, and more. Become a better artist. Click the link to register now. That is a little Instagram dealie that we put together, and so you can go to realismlive.com and register. Now, every day at 3 p.m., as I mentioned, I'm giving you free video segments and teaching you. This man, John Potoshnik, try to say it. Just try to say it right now. Potoshnik, right? John Potoshnik is going to teach you about creating unlimited color. And this is from the video, Create Unlimited Color with a Limited Palette. Make hundreds of color schemes with just one color. Now, when John first showed me the concept, he was in filming this video, which is his Limited Palette Landscapes, which was one of our best sellers. And when he was in telling me, he said, I did all these drawings of all these, the same house, the same scene, and I did it from 3 colors, but I showed lots and lots of different examples of how to do it. So I said, John, we got to publish a book and do a video. And so you're going to get to learn a little bit about this today. But this book, it's basically, I should have called it the mood book, because you can literally just flip to a page, find a mood, and it shows you exactly how to mix it. And the book even comes with a palette that you can kind of lay on top and mix the colors so you can get them exact, but it tells you the formulas and how to mix them. It's really terrific. So you're going to see that today. The way to find it is on YouTube or on Facebook, and we will also replay it on some other mediums. But YouTube and Facebook, you just go in and you search Streamline Art Video, and we would certainly appreciate it if you would subscribe or follow. That always helps. And so that's today at 3 p.m. Let's see, what else do I have going on? Well, first off, tomorrow's prize is a pair of value specs. Now, value specs are kind of a gimmickly little thing, but you're very cool when you wear these. And they're bright red, and I made them bright red, not only because they're red glasses, but I made them bright red because my bag is really dark. And when I was trying it with experimenting with making these, I tried different colors, and I could never find them in my bag. And so the red stands out. So when I reach down into my bag, I can find them right away. But the reason that I made these is because I used to hold a piece of red plexiglass up in front of my eyes to really help me learn and get good at values. And sometimes even after that, I wanted to check my values. I oftentimes do an underpainting when I'm painting outdoors or indoors. And so oftentimes I'll just put these on and do my underpainting, and I nail my values exactly. And then I take them off, I complete my painting. And then usually, as before I complete the painting, finally, I put them back on and I look at the scene and I say, okay, where are my values off? And inevitably I've got something wrong I thought was right. It's just a cheat tool, and they're just handy. I just put them on top of my head when I'm not using them. So anyway, those are value specs. And so tomorrow we're going to give away a pair of those. And of course, we sell those online at, I don't even know where to get them. Paintbynote.com/specs. All right. So the next thing I want to tell you about is that I am going to Russia, and I'm taking a group of artists to Russia, only 50, because we're going to be painting in, I was just going through yesterday, going through all the details on the trip. It's amazing. The entertainment we've got for you, the private viewings. We have a private entry into the Hermitage, the Great Hermitage Museum, one of the biggest and most important museums in the world. We have a private entry, meaning the 50 of us are going to be in that museum, just us. And it's unheard of. And it's something I've been able to do because I've gotten to know people at the Hermitage, including the director. And so this is a rare opportunity in your life. We're also going to the Great Russian Museum. We'll probably meet with the friend of mine who's the former director of the Russian Museum, who just curated the big Repin show, or as they say, Rapin. And so that's going to be happening. And you can go to paintrussia.com to learn more about that. Every Sunday, including today, I do Sunday Coffee with me. You can find it for free at coffeewitheric.com. And it's basically life philosophy. I originally wrote it for my kids to share ideas with my kids. They won't understand it until they get to be about 30 or 40. But a lot of things in there that I share. And so anyway, it kind of caught on. It's up to 250,000 people. And so that's kind of cool. We have what's called the Plein Air Convention. And we will do it live in 2021, hopefully, fingers crossed. It's going to be in May in Denver. And it's a convention where we all get together and we learn from the best people on earth live. We have 5 stages typically. We have watercolor, acrylic, pastel, oil, etc. And we have lots and lots of people doing demos, and we have some art historians and some things like that. And it's really fabulous. And then we take what we've learned that day and we all go out and we paint together. And it's quite a phenomenon to see 1,000, 1,200 people painting together in one location. And of course, Colorado, we've got some great locations picked out. So it's going to be really terrific. Okay, what else is going on? Well, I do an artist retreat, and that artist retreat, I actually do 2 a year, and sometimes an international trip like the Russia. I do a fall and a spring. So Fall Color Week is coming up October 12th through 19, and we are doing it live. It's the only live in-person event we're able to do all year. Yay, finally, might get a little income. Anyway, not much because we had a few people cancel, but we're still doing it. And we still have, I don't know, 60, 70, 80, 90 people coming, and there are some seats left. And so if you want to come, go ahead and get those now because the hotel's kind of opening it up and selling the rest of their rooms. We had held the entire hotel. If you want to go to New Hampshire, if you've been in quarantine, you're safe. We're going to be outdoors painting every day, and we're going to be very careful indoors. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. We play music together at night. We sing, we sit up, and we have fun. And we also set up portraits at night, and we paint portraits while everybody else is singing and having fun. It's really a fun event. And then, of course, we paint all day, and we're painting in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, which the presidential range is spectacular. I was just there. It's beyond amazing. And the color there is very rich. They have lots of deciduous trees, whereas here in the Adirondacks, we have a few, and mostly pine trees here. And so I'm really looking forward to color. But the best part is you get to hang out with other people for a week. You get to paint 2-3 times a day for a week. And when are you going to do that? You know, when you're busy, right? So anyway, also want to tell you that the end of the Plein Air Salon art competition is coming up. I hope you saw the awards on Friday night. Anyway, $30,000 in cash awards for next year. We're going to give away at the Plein Air Convention. That'll be our 10th annual. So you want to get your best paintings, and they're not all plein air. I should stress that we have 20 different categories. We know that most paintings should or maybe do begin live in plein air, or certainly from life. So we actually have portrait competitions. We have all kinds of competitions in this. So you don't have to be just a plein air painter. And there's 30 grand in prizes, monthly prizes, cash, and then big prizes for the winners, including a $15,000 cash prize and the cover of Plein Air magazine, which is always pretty cool. All right. So I think I've covered all the tracks here. I'll cover a couple more. First off, people are always asking me, there's people who are discovering this every single day. And they're discovering it because you guys have been generous in sharing it so other artists can discover this, or people who want to learn about art. And I'm amazed at how many people don't have a clue about us or what we do. So we put together a page called Everything We Do, and it basically shows all the stuff that we have. We have art magazines, we have art newsletters, we have art trips, retreats, we have live online events, we have books, we have art supplies, we have all kinds of things, and lots of websites. And so anyway, that's at streamlinepublishing.com/everything. And the other question I get all the time is what do I do? How do I start my career? How do I market myself? I created this book. It's the #1 Amazon bestseller. It took 1 week to get to bestseller status. It's called Make More Money Selling Your Art. And it is really a good foundational book. You know, for 20, 25 bucks, it's going to give you the foundations of building your career. I've been marketing my entire life. I've not been marketing art my entire life, but I've built businesses. I've done a lot of marketing. I've basically spent my whole life marketing, and I figured some things out. And I have things that I think are not necessarily in other art marketing products, although I have noticed people have been lifting some of my ideas lately, which is fine. That's the whole goal, is that we want people to make sure that they're learning and growing. Last but not least, the Artist and Selfie competition is going to end here soon. October 10th is the deadline. We did this because we wanted to create history. See, most of the great artists throughout history did self-portraits. They did paintings of other artists, and they did paintings of their studios or other artists' studios. And there's a historical documentation throughout the museums of the world because of that and because of what these people have done. And so we decided it would be a good thing to do that. I encouraged people to do self-portraits during the coronavirus at the beginning of this time. And so we created the Artist and Selfie Painting Competition. We're going to give away the awards on Realism Live at the end of Realism Live on the last day. And we will also have a link to that so you can watch it if you're not part of Realism Live. But anyway, it's self-portraits, portraits or paintings of other artists. They don't have to be self-portraits. They don't have to be in portrait style. They could be figure or whatever. But the idea is your self-portrait, other artists, artists in plein air, painting in plein air, and then also art studios. We're trying to create documentation, and we think it's a good idea. So that's the Artist and Selfie competition. Just go to artistandselfie.com. Reminder that Plein Air Magazine continues now, like 5 years and 6 years in a row, the #1 selling art magazine in America. That means it's outselling in the art and photography category. It outsells all other art magazines and all photography magazines. We also just entered Michael's stores. We have 278 Michael's stores, and that's pretty cool. And drum roll coming up here very soon. I think it's releasing like any minute now. And that is Nikolai Blokhin, the great Russian master from the Repin Academy. We finally have been able to get someone over there to reveal their techniques. And so we've created a video. He does this with a live model as we painted this over 5 days. It's incredible to watch how he developed this. And, you know, if there's anybody who paints closer to Odd Nerdrum, I think it's Nikolai Blokhin. Of course, Odd Nerdrum is part of Realism Live, as I mentioned before. Okay, so now we're going to go to the best part of today, and that is to go to Stephen Bauman. Okay, Stephen, thanks for your tolerance for all my announcements.
It's all good, man. I understand.
Are
we ready to roll?
Yeah, we're ready to roll. So take it away.
All right. Let's go to the next camera then, where I've got all of my drawings. So let's just say a little bit of background on this. These are, believe it or not, what I refer to as kind of quick sketches. I made a quick sketch tutorial where I kind of tried to show how you can rapidly develop a head as a drawing rather than some of the more protracted, the longer projects that I'll do. And today I'm going to use these as kind of a template to show you basically to kind of cut through the noise in terms of how we view artwork and where that artwork kind of starts, right? So for students, it's really important sometimes not to know necessarily like what it looks like when the painting or the drawing is finished, but really what it looks like when we have a blank sheet of paper. So the concept I'm talking about today is something that'll probably be relatively familiar to you from a visual perspective, we've all seen portrait artists kind of put these center lines down the fronts of faces, right? And up until a point, I don't think we really understand always the utility of that, or at least I didn't before I kind of studied and kind of developed these techniques for myself. But basically, the center line, the concept that it relies upon is that the head is essentially structurally symmetrical. So what we find on one side, we'll also find on the other side. Now, when you have nothing on the paper, it can be a little bit challenging, like I said, to kind of figure out where to start, especially with all the values that we're seeing, the shadow values and highlights and things. I prefer to start with a kind of linear approach. So a lot of times the center line will be the first thing that I draw. After that, I want to start to figure out what the kind of parameters, the top and the bottom of the head are. After that, we want to talk about the features, right? We talk about the eyes, we talk about the nose, we talk about the lips, and how they kind of play a role in the block-in. So like I said, this all depends on that idea that the head is a structurally symmetrical subject. So we start out by indicating, for instance, the angle of the brow ridge. Now, what's interesting about that, oh wait, did we switch back? All right, there we go. So what's interesting about that, right, is that the nose and the lips are also all following that same angle, right? Or at the very least, we can say that within some idiosyncratic parameters where every face is a little bit different, we're also a lot more alike than we are kind of different. So this idea that all the features are symmetrical is not mathematical per se, but more often than not, we find that all of these angles will kind of line up. Now, that's also really just a starting point, because we also have features that kind of extend a little bit further out from that center line that are also going to be symmetrical. So let's start with the edges of the forehead, right? We have a kind of major plane shift that that sits here just above and outside the eye socket. What's interesting to understand there as well is that this feature is also represented along the contour of the face. So that same angle break that exists inside the head is also kind of showing itself out here at the edge. Now, when we start to consider that, we can see all of the other angle breaks as well, also being represented both outside and inside the head. So I'm going to start by kind of communicating some of the major planes of the head, and you can see them here kind of in perspective, right? So what I've done essentially is to give myself a kind of three-dimensional template that indicates where the features can be placed, right? And that three-dimensional template is always dependent upon me looking on one side and the other and finding something, some communication between them that relates to all of the other features, right? So once we figure out one sense of like the tilt of the head, like we did on the brow ridge, we also start to understand that the nostrils, the lips, the cheekbones, the edges of the forehead, all those things kind of correlate along the same edge, right? And so this should probably start to look a little bit more familiar to you, to some of the drawing examples that you might have seen, you know, in drawing books, and maybe you've watched some tutorial videos. Certainly, if you've watched my tutorial videos, then you've definitely seen this. But we're building up that three-dimensional structure. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, as a teacher, when I get the question, you know, that students will feel like they have a problem with accuracy. And while that's not totally untrue, I think that in fact, the problem really is with construction more so than just strictly accuracy itself. Accuracy to me, I think in terms of portraiture, I'll say at least, is more of an outcome of making other decisions that have kind of led you to that place. Not that because I draw a lot of heads, I draw accurate heads. I have practice though, kind of leading up to, you know, getting the features into the right place. And so you can see, having built this up, you can see how well the eye socket, let me just switch to another color here so we can see a little bit better what I'm talking about. So you can see how the eye socket fits into that template, right? Now, Eric, I don't know if you can hear me while I'm doing all this. If you have any kind of questions that you think kind of come up while I'm doing this, I know I talk a little bit of a mile a minute. So if there's something that I need to make less ambiguous, just let me know.
You're doing great. You're a good teacher. I'll not step in unless it's required.
All right, fantastic, fantastic. So, so talked a little bit about the structure of the head. Talked a little bit about how the features kind of fit into that, right? And maybe if we have the time, I'm going to investigate a couple of other portraits. But I just want to make sure I get the kind of baseline of this idea across before we move on to other examples. Now, you can see also that there are going to be some things that maybe seem strange, right? Which is to say, this center line is related to a head that doesn't have any features protruding from it, right? Like if we look at that head from the side, what we're basically looking at is something that looks like this. We have a front plane that doesn't really have a nose sticking out of it, right? So what happens when we need to start talking about the nose? Well, for me and my process, what I would start to do then is not to really abandon this idea of kind of planar construction. And let me just switch back to that red.
Maybe you could pick a different color. That one's blending it a little to the background.
Oh, the green?
The green, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. So I'm going to switch back to the red for a moment here, and maybe I can just recreate a little bit. Yeah, that green is maybe just a little bit too light to see in relationship to the paper. So let's say we want to start indicating how the nose projects outward from the face. I tend to, in the beginning of my drawings, actually just extend this stage where I'm working on a kind of geometrical planar conception of the head. And actually draw in the nose also as a set of planes. Now, I want to mention also, I'm doing all this digitally here, right? When I did these drawings, of course, I was working in graphite and white chalk. So naturally, those were the materials that I was using for the block-in. When you're blocking in really early on, I like to use much harder leads, like a 4H or a 2H. I think also sometimes we need to clarify a little bit of what the purpose of all the different grades of graphite are. I know when I was an art student just starting out, I saw these pencil kits and there's 10 different hardnesses, and really for the life of me, I had no idea what to do with them. Effectively, we're talking about values, right? So a 4H, which is a very hard grade of graphite, is going to make naturally a light value on the paper, whereas a 4B, a very soft grade of graphite, is going to make a very dark line on the paper. So with that in mind, when we think about the kinds of lines that we want to have in the beginning of a drawing, we want flexible lines. We want lines that are easy to erase and easy to move around. So I use my 4Hs and my 2Hs very early on in the process. Not exclusively, of course, but for students, I like to recommend that just because the tool that you're using influences naturally how you're going to work and how you're going to use it. So for me, those soft leads are what I would use in the beginning. So when I do this kind of planar construction of the nose, you can see that I'm essentially drawing a line right alongside where the highlight sits on the nose. If I was using a really soft lead and putting a lot of kind of dark graphite onto the paper, naturally that would be a little bit of a problem because later I'm going to have to put white chalk on top of that, and maybe I can't erase all of it away. Long story short, hard leads in the beginning, very light touch with your hand, and you should have an easy time building up a construction for your drawing that is easy to remove afterwards.
What do you do in terms of measurement? One of the most difficult things for me on getting a nose is getting the right angle, getting the right measurement.
For sure. It touches on a really interesting topic too, which is basically when you're starting out a drawing, right, you're in a place where things are abstract. Now, even though your kind of goal is eventually representational, the first lines that we draw on the paper, like I told you, my center lines, this doesn't look like a head, does it, right? So part of what I do is to measure, but part of what I do also is to kind of try to more rationally connect things together. For me, one of the things that clued me off early in my career as a student in terms of like how to, and by the way, I am addressing the question here. I don't want to, I know I kind of tend to talk around things a little bit, but if we're talking about measurement, we're talking about proportion, and proportion is a relationship to accuracy. So all of these things kind of tie together a little bit for me. So one of the things that I want to do is as quickly as possible, get something that looks like a head. Not even if it's this model whose name is Travis. Even if it doesn't look like Travis, it will look like a head. And that will allow me to kind of determine a little bit more, just with my eyes, naively looking at it, whether or not I'm kind of creating a template for the head that will fit Travis's template. The other thing, right, that we can do is try to make comparative measurements. So once again, let me just get to another color. Let's see if I get one that actually kind of shows up. Hopefully this blue is going to be dark enough to kind of show up. But let's say, let's go to actually this head over here, because I want a kind of clean slate to actually talk about this. So, sorry, just got to get the correct color. There we go. So starting out, I've got my center line, I've got my brow ridge, bottom plane of the nose, and let's say I start to indicate the cheekbones and the sides of the head. At this point, I think we have enough on the paper to actually start to take measurements. So what I'll do in terms of creating measurements is I'll start out just by taking a width. You know what? That blue doesn't show up as well as I want. Let's see if I get a dark green. No. Sorry. Sorry to delay the cast. But what I'd like to do is to choose a measurement that I think will be a kind of a good template for the rest of my measurements. So I'll take, for instance, the distance in between the cheekbones, right? After I have that distance, that I measure usually with like the side of my pencil. So like I'll have the edge of my pencil and the tip like this, and one of my fingers will be here and one will be there. So that's how I'm kind of translating this measurement into a kind of unit that I can compare to other things. After that, I'll start to look at.
Can you explain that just a little bit more? Because I think that's going to confuse some people. Because you're holding your arm straight out, so it's always straight when you do that measurement? Yes, no?
Fair question. No. Comparative measurements in this instance are going to be very different from, like, say, working in sight size. So what I'm usually doing is if I have like my iPad next to me, and you got to keep the camera on me for a second so I can do this. I'll literally just take my pencil, and this is my Wacom. Could you switch back to it? There we go.
There we go.
So I'll hold my finger on the edge of the pencil and consider the tip of this. And I'm going to put that up to, let me see if I can do it to my face. I'm going to put it up to my iPad until that distance kind of matches my cheekbones. And then I'll flip it and compare that to the height of the head. And usually what you'll find is that, let's say we're talking again about the cheekbones here, that will fit once or twice or 2.5 times into the total height of the head. You can see, of course, how this measurement is a little bit imprecise, but this is very much actually my feeling about measurements is that I can only rely on them so much. Measuring, in a sense, when you think about the tools that you're using to do it, I think it's relatively inaccurate, I guess. So what I tend to prefer actually is relying a little bit more on our eye and our mind to kind of understand the recognition to the model. I hope that all makes sense. Yep. So for me, likeness, comes out of kind of good construction. And if I have a good template that builds up the features, I feel like I'll be able to recognize, just in the same way, right, that you're watching the stream of me today. You see my face on the camera, right? Tomorrow, if I show up on a different stream that's not Eric's, it's the radio station in Miami, Y100. They're doing a live streaming event on YouTube. You see my face on there. I guarantee that you'll remember and recognize. We have an incredibly strong innate sense of naive recognition, especially when it comes to faces, right? We look at faces all the time, hundreds, thousands of faces on TV and in real life. What we need to do, though, is make a connection in between the flat, absent abstraction of a white piece of paper and eventually the source image or the model that we have in front of us. And the connection that we want to make in between those two things, and let's switch back to the camera, I've got my drawings, is this, right? This head template is what I use to kind of narrow the gap in between nothing, a void of abstraction on a white piece of paper, and the source image and or live model that I'm working from. The template for the head sits in between those two things. And like I said, the principle that it functions upon is essentially this idea of structural symmetry. So I wanted to bring up a couple other heads. How much time do I have, by the way, Eric? If I could just ask, can you hear me? So
did you hear me? I said about 25 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I didn't hear. So I just needed to double check that just so I don't run out of time. So let's see. Let me just get onto the right layer here on Photoshop, and then I will start out. So this is another drawing of mine, and it's a much longer form drawing. The other drawings maybe took 2.5, 3 hours per head. This one is a video that I made. The entire run time was probably between 9 and 11 hours, right? So I had a lot more time to kind of subtly go through the movements in terms of like creating form and kind of softness. And I think it was important, or I think for the purposes of this this stream, it was important to also show a different kind of drawing. Like I said earlier, you know, construction lines, if we are too heavy-handed, what they can do is kind of get a little bit into the way of eventually making a very refined drawing. And I think this is something, especially for kind of beginning students, that they'll be a little bit wary of, right? Is if I draw my construction lines here, and later, you know, I need to have like a beautiful kind of brilliant, very lightly drawn passage, isn't that going to kind of interrupt it a little bit too much? Part of bringing up this drawing is just to show that also we can kind of get to this place as well by kind of using the same tools. By the way, you can almost actually see really lightly just through here my center line left over, which I think actually also, by the way, just from an artistic sense, for me at least, it tends to leave a nice effect of the hand of the artist inside the artwork, which is something I'm very kind of fond of doing. So let's go through this one also and just kind of break down some of the more kind of complex aspects of the kind of center line process, right? So I talked about on Travis, the kind of most basic element for that, but I also want to talk about how we can kind of connect together other ideas, right? So we can use other concepts and other tools like anatomy to kind of strengthen and deepen the utility of this kind of centerline concept, right? Which is also, by the way, something that I find out there for students can be really hard, is to actually get a really good grasp on what anatomy is doing for you as an artist, right? I think that the most common misconception that I come across, and this is just in my experience, though, is that people will learn a lot how to name the anatomy, but maybe not how to use the anatomy. So for students, when I did teach anatomy, for my students, I think the primary thing I was interested in was getting the anatomy into their drawings so that it was a kind of living and vital part of their process, right? So how do we do that? One of the things that will probably be evident to you if you have a little bit of anatomical background is that each of these angle breaks is going to be related usually, right, to a kind of skeletal feature, right? That we have a skull underneath all of this skin and fat and hair, and that is guiding a lot of the forms of the head to kind of be revealed. And maybe the more that you know about them, even naming them for that matter, the more utility you can make out of them in the beginning. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to break this down for a quick second, go back to the kind of planes of the nose that I was describing in the previous drawing, just so we have a full kind of picture of the head that we can look at. And then I'm going to kind of break down some of the anatomy that kind of comes into and informs this this constructive tool. So let's start out up here, right, in the forehead, and just above the top plane of the nose. What you're going to find is a feature of the skull called the glabella, right? And it's this keystone shaped feature. At least it's fairly keystone shape in a simplification like this one. There's a lot of like skeletal variation in between people, especially between men and women. Men will have very different features in their frontal bone. This bone here, usually than women will. So in men, it can look actually very dramatic. With these really exaggerated kind of brow ridges up here, running across what's called the superciliary arch. Certainly present in women, but usually not as noticeable. So we start out with the glabella, right? And you can see also how starting out with the glabella leads you really, really easily into that very characteristic shape of the eye socket, right? What the glabella is doing essentially is giving you that inner upper corner of the eye socket that is such a great kind of landmark to hold on to in terms of your later development of the features. In addition to this, we also have out here at the edges what is referred to in Paul Richet's classic anatomical text is referred to as the external orbital apophysis. And I promise I'm not going to do many more terms, because I know that unless you really, really get into memorization, they just go in one ear and like out the other. It's fine.
But we are very impressed.
That's what they're there for. That's what they're supposed to do. But this is again just showing how you know, there can be a conceptual understanding of the head that is like this facial template is a little bit abstract, but it also is always going to be kind of relying on real anatomical features. We all know, of course, the cheekbones here, right? The zygomatic bones, and we find those in a 3/4 portrait that's kind of turned this way. We find that very characteristic angle break right here. And we also find that really clearly represented usually when you have a good kind of light source coming in, as we do kind of up here in this upper left-hand corner, right? You're going to find a really great kind of plane shift happening here. And that's really owing a lot to both the zygomatic bone, but also the zygomatic arch, which kind of leads back here to the ear, right? So this zygomatic arch, when we look at the face from the front, the zygomatic arch is actually the widest part of the face. So we have the zygomatic arch here, and then we have like the frontal bone is actually a lot more narrow, kind of in here. So the forehead, of course, not at all the widest part of the face, but rather those the zygomatic arch kind of out here reaches its kind of widest point. But there's also a way, and this is so, by the way, this is so cool. As a former anatomy teacher, I can tell you, we get really nerdy and really excited about this stuff, even if we know that that it might only be cool to us. It's cool if you learn about it. But one of the things that the zygomatic arch does is it actually prepares you to understand, and let me get to the right size brush here so I can express this. All of this planar information is really there to help you express the volume of the head, right? The conflict, the eternal conflict that we have as representational artists. And let's speak about figurative as well. Plein air, there's a lot of different, I'm not that guy, that's Eric. But as far as figurative work, one of the primary things that you're up against is that you're working on a flat surface, and the world you're trying to represent is three-dimensional. So there's a great kind of burden of proof that is on you to show us, right? To show the viewer, to show your own eye. In fact, that naive sense of recognition is based on seeing something similar to reality. So proving the three-dimensionality of something is really a big part of representational art. So back to the diagram, and what's so exciting about these kind of planar concepts, and why the zygomatic arch is the thing that really set me off, is if you start to look at the way that the contour is shaped, right? It starts to show us actually what direction planes are facing. So let's echo that out on this left-hand side here and say, actually, if we extend that, that contour out like this, what it would be showing us actually is the turning planes of the head. So we have here, for instance, a plane that is in halftone or in shadow. We have a plane here that is in halftone and shadow with the light source that we have coming in, like I explained, right? Responding to those planes, it becomes very easy to understand the progression of value throughout the head. How fascinating is that, right? I hope everybody gets excited as I do about that.
It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Great. So then let's take a look inside the face here. What does it tell us? The eye sockets are actually a down-turning plane, right? They're actually turning a little bit away from the light source. The forehead, of course, is turning up towards the light source. The same thing with the plane below the zygomatic arch, right? And as I said, I was talking about looking at the face from the front. You can see actually what the plane shift is there, right? The forehead and the upper section of the head, like above the zygomatic arch, is facing upward. Below that, it's facing downward, right? So we have a way to understand. And let's switch to another color here real quick so I don't get too ambiguous. So we have a way of understanding what the volume of the head is in this direction, but we also have a way of understanding what the volume of the head is in a kind of a north-south or top-bottom direction, right? So these clues, right, are being revealed to us through the use of this facial template. And that's what I think, for me, is so interesting about it, is that it's not something that only relates to what you have when you need to first put something on the paper. It relates to really everything that comes after too, right? All of the really like soft values, and let me just switch this layer off and start a new one. All of the like really, really soft values that you see kind of indicated on the face here are actually something that is already being reflected in that initial block-in, right? So we can go back to that plane and we can see all of those same lines and abstractions that we were using are actually being represented in these really refined and really kind of soft values. So like I said, you know, earlier on when I was talking about this, you can see a little bit like the some of the marks left over in the surface of the paper. You know, they're kind of cool to see as the hand of the artist, but by the way, they're also very cool to help you kind of keep track of what that construction of the head is.
So even you go through this process with every portrait you do, or did you get to a point where you don't even need to do that anymore?
Oh, I got to a point where I always need to do this. Always. For sure. You know, the thing about it is that actually the more I use it, the better I get at using. And that's why I try to refer to it as like a tool, right? Because the first time you do it, and this is, we'll all know this with everything that we've learned in painting, right? Like you learned about underpainting, where you learn to block in something in raw umber. The first time you block in something in raw umber, by the way, you don't really know how to use it or you know, how much of it, how thick, how thin, how much medium, whatever. The first time we use an underpainting, usually it's a little bit clumsy. If you started to use it as like a part of your process by painting 100 or painting 200, you're an expert with raw umber, using thin layers of it to create the foundation for your painting, right? The template of the head, or this concept at the center line, is no different than that. The 100th time you use it, it only becomes more useful to you. Right. Does that make sense?
Yep, total sense.
Okay, so let's get on to, I'm actually kind of excited. Let's get on to this John Singer Sargent painting, right? I know that, by the way, if you have ever looked at portraiture as a mode of representation for what you want to do, inevitably you've looked at John Singer Sargent. It's unavoidable. He's one of the fairly accepted like 19th century masters. There might be other portrait painters that you like more, but as far as like painting a head goes, by the way, especially for students, he's a really great source of inspiration, partly because all of his thinking, because of the nature of how he painted, is really on the surface of the painting, right? So we've all heard of kind of alla prima painting. I wouldn't say that Sargent is necessarily always an alla prima painter, but he is a very direct painter. So the final layer that you see, the final brush strokes that you see, are the last ones usually that he made on the canvas. And that means his paintings can reveal a lot to us in terms of, you know, what conceptions he had of the head, what he used to kind of block in. And there are there's a lot of documentation online that you can find, but certainly he was known really well for actually having blocked in more the features of the head first, rather than say the you know, starting with the eye and kind of moving outward from there. And that block-in that he would do, it's always going to kind of follow along that idea, the major planes of the face that I was kind of talking about. So whether or not you have the existence of like a clear center line, what you would definitely have in Sargent's work would be a kind of concept of the head that would look roughly like this, where you'd have basically that front plane versus the side plane, right? And once I kind of draw this template on here, what I want to do is actually just look at some of the value shifts in his painting and how it kind of follows along with this kind of template. Hope this green is showing up. I chose it because it's kind of complementary to the color scheme generally in the painting.
Yes, you can see it.
Okay, cool. So looking at this, one of the first divisions I want to point out is actually between the side plane of the cheek and the front plane of the cheek, right? On either side of this kind of dividing line, coming down from the cheekbone down to the kind of edges of the light shape of the chin, we see a distinctly different set of values. And by the way, I know probably everybody's going to have a vocabulary that's pretty similar here. We're talking about values as opposed to color because we're talking about the relative degree of lightness or darkness of that area, right? So if you look at the set of values here, of course, there's many different colors inside of it as well. But if you look at the set of values, they're distinctly different from the set of values here on the front-facing light plane of the cheek, right? And that is taken directly out of this concept of the facial template. Let's take also the nose. Let's extend out our block in order to kind of include a little bit this concept of the of planes, right? That kind of emanate out of that center line. And we also see in general on the top plane of the nose, a significantly different set of values to what we find on the side plane of the nose, with the exception, and by the way, this is really interesting, when the wing of the nose comes up here, you see a shift to a value that almost is the equal of something that we might find on the top plane, right? The thing that I can guarantee to you is that actually when this was blocked in, that side plane was blocked in as a single value, and then he added that higher key value or that lighter value to indicate how that section of the nostril actually tilts upward a little bit. So another one that I think is interesting, let's look at this, let's add the glabella onto here as well, right? And kind of make a little bit less ambiguous some of these lines. Look at the upper section of the eye socket versus basically the lower section of the eye socket. We can see this highlight here being kind of roughly indicative of the up-facing plane at the top of the zygomatic bone, which is your cheekbone. And we think of that kind of generic shape of the eye socket that I think we all kind of fairly well understand, right? Like that as the shape of an eye socket that roughly looks like this. You see this division in between the top and bottom of it. Look at the values above that division and the values below that division, right? What we have here, right, in the down-facing plane of the lower eyelid is kind of like an interloper. But it's one that actually confuses people a lot. Because we see like a dark value in here, we assume that the kind of plane of the eye socket is kind of traveling a lot lower down than it actually is.
You also get some reflected light up in there that probably throws you off in the dark area.
For sure, yeah. If we have like really strong reflected light into that upper edge of the eye socket, we can have a little bit of a, what's the word? A confusion about it, right? But again, let's look at, let's come over here to this, this outer edge, right? Let's look at the shape of this outer edge. So it goes here and then here, right? So what do we know about what that means about the planes that are being indicated there, right? The upper half, basically, of the eye socket is a down-facing plane. And you see the values that Sargent's used to indicate it. Again, darker values, the forehead being made of kind of lighter values. We have that up-facing plane, down-facing plane, up-facing again. So really fascinating stuff that can be revealed here that, again, echoes all the way out into painting. And I was saying, I know just a moment ago, you're asking, you know, do you still use this when you're working? I think even when I'm not using it, the things that I know because I use it actually still come into play, right? When I'm painting ahead, you know, the way that I'll block it in a lot of times is to start by kind of indicating, you know, with a slightly darker value that side plane. And I'll start by indicating how the glabella and the upper edges of the eye sockets are actually kind of down turning planes as well. And certainly when you start to kind of block in things like the forehead, top planes of the cheeks, you're going to be using that lighter value just because you know in general, right, that you're going to be your starting point there is going to be of a higher key value than what it'll be on the side planes of the head, for instance. So this unlocks all sorts of different improvisations that you can make, which I know that, I mean, I studied extensively painting. I studied at ateliers for maybe 4 or 5 years, and I've been teaching ever since. So I'm kind of quite steeped in the makeup of kind of learning painting. I know that not everybody out there that paints portraits has gone through like that much training or that much education. For those of you that have, you probably understand this. For those of you who are a little bit more self-taught, this might not be a surprise, but it's just something that you should know, I think, is that the tools that you find in your painting and drawing education, you can improvise with them. They're not made, I think if they're made well, they're not made to only be used in that single instance in a vacuum, absent from all other influences. This can be used in so many different approaches to painting and drawing. And like I said, even nowadays, when I'm not using it, I'm actually still kind of using it. I
think the idea of blocking everything in, this is what confuses me, is I see those lights in the darks. And as a result, I kind of start out by trying to put in what I'm seeing instead of building that foundation of the planes of the head.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's a really cool idea that was introduced to me, I think, pretty early on. And again, this is one that, it's so cool when you learn something that is not about just one moment. It's about the entire arc of your education. But the idea of going from the simple into the specific, right? So very early on, like when I did my first bark drawing, the idea was introduced that you should start with the simplest possible expression of the subject, right? So when we're looking at a head and we're looking at it, it's full of detail. Let's just take this layer away for a second. We're looking at this head, it's full of detail. What is the simplest thing that you can do to make something look like this head, right? And this echoes also, by the way, into values. And that's why I say it's kind of versatile. The simplest version of what you can make out of this would really probably be just a fairly flat shape of value. That if you think that variety versus unity of value, the simpler expression would be a unified value. So it kind of, it's an idea that leads you, and I think this is so cool, leads you into good choices, I guess. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Cool.
Well, this has been
time, Eric?
We're pretty much out of time.
Okay. All right. Well, we got the sergeant. I'm happy that we got the sergeant.
Yeah. Well, this was fabulous. It was very worthwhile, and I think something everybody got a lot out of, and I really appreciate you doing it. Tell me briefly, what are you going to do on Realism Live?
On Realism Live, I'm going to be doing essentially a direct painting demo. It's when you hear direct painting, I know that you're going to think alla prima. It's not alla prima, but it's direct. So there will be some use of raw umber. There's going to be also a lot of very direct painting, good color values, and hopefully a few diagrams. It's a really short time to squeeze it all in, but I'm going to squeeze in some diagramming so that people can get a little bit more of this kind of vision of what I'm getting up to. Okay, terrific. Well, Stephen Bauman, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on today. Hey, it's my pleasure, Eric. Yeah. And by the way, it's just his website is stephenbaumanartwork.com. And that's where your instructional tutorials and so on are as well. So you're a fabulous teacher. Congratulations. I wish I was you. On a good day. On a good day. Thanks so much, Eric. All right. Thank you. So Stephen Bauman is going to be on Realism Live with us, and we're going to be in the world's largest virtual art conference. In case you missed it, in case you just tuned in, we had a major announcement, and that is that Odd Nerdrum is going to be on the faculty of Realism Live. But the faculty is huge and fabulous people. Jennifer Balkan, Dan Gerhardt, Cornelia Hernes, Daniel Graves from Florence Academy, Daniel Sprick, Eric Koppel, Dean Mitchell, Aaron Meads, Gabrielle Deloso, Jeff Legg, Graydon Parrish, Jesus Manuel Villarreal, Juliet Aristides, Mark D'Alessio, Kathy Anderson, Rose Franson, Stephen Bauman, who you just met, Tony Serenai, Todd Casey, Victoria Herrera, Kathy Odom, Josh LaRock, William Schneider, Connor Walton. It is just an incredible lineup, and that's that's realismlive.com. I'm just going to play for you real quickly this promo.
Do you wish you could draw or paint but lack the confidence? Many people think it requires natural talent, yet anyone can learn to draw or paint. You could spend $3,000 or more to attend a live workshop or convention, or you can learn it from the world's finest for a fraction of the cost at Realism Live, the world's first virtual online art conference devoted to realism. 4 days of world-class artists demonstrating in portraiture, landscapes, still life, the human figure, flowers, color mixing, drawing, painting, and more. Realism Live, October 21st through the 24th. And for people who want to learn painting from scratch, start with our Beginner's Day on October 20th. Soon you'll be painting faces, people, flowers, scenery, objects, and other subjects. You'll see your artwork get better faster as you learn from top artists from all over the world. Make history as part of the world's first Realism Art Conference. Sign up today and join the world as we learn art together. From the publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air, and Realism Today. Realism Live. Sign up today.
We have a massive number of people signed up from all over the world, also a huge faculty. Check it out at realismlive.com. Remember, $200 saved if you get in before the end of this month. You can get in later, but there's no reason to pay more. You're going to love this, and we have a 100% guarantee. If you don't like it after the first day, you get the first day for free. We give you your money back. So you're going to love it. We're that confident. We offered that guarantee with Plein Air Live, our first virtual conference, and nobody took us up on it. So you're going to love it. We have a fabulous faculty. Thank you to Stephen Bauman today, fabulous teacher. You can find him at stephenbaumanartwork.com. And thank you for watching. We've been here day number 186 now, 6 months and 1 day, every single day. So thank you for that. It means a lot to me. I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air magazine, among